Don't you dare sit there.
The shout cracked through the country club dining room like a whip. Heads snapped toward the sound. A waitress, red-faced, shaking with rage, had her hand fisted in the sleeve of a 16-year-old black girl's dress, dragging her out of her chair so violently the linen tablecloth jerked and water glasses toppled. Silverware clattered. A wine glass shattered. The girl, Camille, stumbled, caught herself on the edge of the table, and froze as laughter rippled through the room like heat from an open oven.
Get your hands off me!
Camille whispered, voice trembling. But the waitress only sneered.
Oh, please. Charity guests don't get to talk back.
She shoved Camille so hard her chair skidded backward and slammed into another table. A couple gasped, but they didn't intervene. No one did.
You think you can just walk into this dining room?
The waitress barked, stepping closer, her voice booming beneath the crystal chandeliers.
You don't belong here.
A few diners chuckled. Someone whispered,
Who let her in?
Another muttered.
Standards are slipping around here.
Camille's face went hot, then cold.
I'm with my friend.
Amelia, who invited her, stiffened. Her gaze dropped to her plate. She didn't defend her. Didn't speak. Didn't move. The waitress scoffed.
Oh, I know who you came with. I know exactly why you're here. But these invitations aren't for people like you. Next time,
She grabbed Camille's arm again, nails biting into her skin.
use the service entrance.
People gasped. A few ugly laughs. A man clapped once like he was applauding live entertainment. Camille's water glass slipped from the table and shattered on the floor. Security appeared instantly, not for the waitress, but for Camille. Ma'am, causing a disturbance is grounds for removal, the security chief said, stepping forward as if she were the threat.
I didn't do anything!
That's not what we observed, the manager said smoothly as he approached, hands folded like a diplomat. His smile was polite, but his tone dripped with condescension. We expect our guests to behave appropriately in this club.
I am behaving appropriately.
And raising your voice is another violation, the manager replied calmly. This is a private establishment. You aren't familiar with the rules here. A woman at a nearby table muttered loudly, someone should call her parents. Or whoever she lives with. Another diner added, standards must be enforced. You let one in, next thing you know? The laughter returned, sharper now, emboldened by cruelty. Camille's eyes stung. Her humiliation filled the room like smoke. Her friend sat frozen. The waitress smirked, arms crossed in triumph.
Escort her out now.
The waitress commanded. Security grabbed Camille by the arm. And just as they began pulling her toward the exit, the dining room lights flickered. The doors at the far end opened. A man stepped inside. Tall, composed, expensive suit. A presence that made even the chandeliers seem to pull back. He scanned the room once. And then his eyes landed on Camille, tear-streaked, trembling, her arm held by security. His face changed. The kind of anger that doesn't explode, it detonates. A hush spread outward like a shockwave. Someone whispered, "Who is that?" The waitress rolled her eyes.
Probably here to pick up dishes from the kitchen.
But she was wrong. Very, very wrong. In seconds, the entire club would learn exactly who they had just humiliated, and why their lives were about to unravel. The dining room fell so quiet the chandeliers buzzed. The tall man in the doorway didn't move at first. He simply stood there, framed in gold light from the lobby, his jaw tight, his hands slowly curling into fists at his sides. He looked like a man who had swallowed fire. The manager cleared his throat, mistaking the man's silence for uncertainty. "Sir," he called across the room, "we're handling a situation here. If you could please wait in the lobby." The man didn't look at him. He only looked at Camille. And something in his face, something sharp, something ancient, made the manager's voice falter. Camille's breath hitched. "Dad?" she whispered. A ripple moved through the room. "That?" The security guard holding her arm loosened his grip. Just slightly. The waitress frowned, confused. "That's her father? That can't be right. He wasn't on the guest list." But the man, Alexander Ward, didn't give her a chance to finish. He stepped forward slowly. The kind of walk a man uses when he knows he doesn't need to raise his voice to be dangerous. With each step he took, the temperature in the dining room dropped. Whispers flitted between tables. He looks familiar. Isn't that? No, it can't be. Wait, is that Alexander Ward? The name spread like a lit fuse. The waitress finally sensed something was wrong. She smoothed her apron, forcibly straightening her spine. Sir, if you're here for the staff exit? He walked right past her without acknowledging she existed. Straight to Camille. He didn't touch her. Not yet. He simply looked at the guard still holding her. A single look. The guard instantly released her arm. Camille fell into her father's side, trembling with the kind of humiliation that had no words. He steadied her gently, then lifted her chin with a single finger. Her skin was blotched from shame. Her eyes were glassy. Her lip trembled. He exhaled once, slowly. Then he turned, finally, to the staff. To the manager. To the security chief. To the waitress whose arrogance had carried her far past safety. What, Alexander said softly, is happening to my daughter? The manager blinked. Forced a smile. Sir, this is simply a misunderstanding. Your daughter was causing a disturbance. Causing a disturbance? Alexander's voice never rose, but something in it made the room shrink. My daughter was screamed at, grabbed, humiliated, and threatened. In front of, he surveyed the room. 87 members and guests. The waitress bristled, crossing her arms. Well, she sat in the wrong section. She was making other diners uncomfortable. Uncomfortable? Alexander repeated quietly. By sitting at a table? She wasn't dressed appropriately, the waitress snapped. She clearly didn't belong here. Before Alexander could respond, a man 2 tables away leaned back in his chair and said loudly, she doesn't. Everyone knows who belongs in this club. A few men chuckled. One woman hid her smile behind a napkin. Camille flinched. Alexander did not look at them. Not yet. Predators don't look at prey until they're ready to strike. Instead, he turned to the manager. You allowed this, he said. You supported this. And now you're lying to cover it. That's not true, the manager sputtered. We enforce standards here. We. Alexander raised a hand. The manager fell silent immediately, as if his throat simply obeyed. Standards, Alexander murmured. It's always that word. Such a polite way to justify cruelty. The waitress scoffed. We're not being cruel. We're protecting the environment. You people. She froze. Her cheeks were drained of color. Alexander tilted his head slowly. You people? The room held its breath. I didn't mean it like that, she stuttered. I just meant people who don't know the rules. People who look like my daughter? He asked. She said nothing. Silence answered for her. Alexander finally straightened. In this club, he said softly, you enforce policies meant to segregate. You humiliate children. You insult families you don't know. We don't discriminate, the manager snapped. Alexander turned slightly. His voice dropped to a whisper, cold and precise. Then why, he asked, did none of you ask who she was? No one responded. A fork clinked to the floor somewhere in the back. Alexander reached into his jacket. 2 security guards tensed, but he only pulled out a leather folder. He opened it. The pages gleamed under the chandelier. Printed signatures. Corporate seals. Ownership percentages. He handed it to the manager. With shaking hands, the man read the first line aloud, barely breathing. Ward Holdings, 62% controlling stake in Hawthorne Ridge Country Club. A gasp tore through the room. The waitress's knees buckled. Alexander stepped closer to the manager. My daughter, he said calmly, is not a guest. She is not a charity case. She is not an outsider. He leaned in. She is your majority owner's child. The document slipped from the manager's hands. A collective shudder moved through the crowd as the truth settled in. Alexander straightened his suit jacket. Now, he said, let's discuss the consequences. The waitress's mouth opened, but no sound came out. First, he said, turning to her, you are terminated. Effective immediately. Collect your belongings. She collapsed into a chair. Second, he said, facing the manager, you are relieved of duty. Escorting a minor out of a facility her family owns? Unacceptable. The manager paled. You can't fire me. I can, Alexander replied. And I just did. Sir, the security chief began, we were following protocol. It's club policy. Then the policy is wrong, Alexander said. And I am firing you for enforcing it. The man's mouth fell open. But, sir, you put your hands on my daughter, Alexander said, his voice steady but lethal. There will be legal consequences as well. The security chief took a stumbling step backward. Several diners hurriedly looked away, suddenly fascinated by their plates. Alexander finally put a protective arm around Camille's shoulders. Then he turned to the guests. As for the rest of you, he said, any member who thinks my daughter does not belong here is welcome to terminate their membership. I will not tolerate a club where people like you feel empowered to mock children. A woman near the bar shot to her feet. This is outrageous. We've been members for 20 years. Then you should understand the bylaws, Alexander replied. Owners outrank members. She sat down. Alexander looked at Camille. Her chin trembled. Her shoulders shook. But her eyes held fire now. A spark. Let's go, he said softly. He led her toward the exit. But just as they reached the door, Camille stopped. Dad, she whispered. What happens now? Alexander looked back at the dining room. At the staff. At the guests. At the legacy of a club built on exclusion disguised as elegance. Now, he said, now we burn this system down and rebuild it right. But before he could take another step, a voice interrupted. Cold, arrogant, entitled. It came from the far end of the room. Well, the voice drawled, isn't this dramatic? Camille stiffened. Alexander slowly turned. A man in his 60s stood, adjusting an expensive cufflink. Gray hair carefully styled. Smile razor-thin. A founding member. And one of the last people who should have spoken. In my experience, the man said, certain families only cause trouble when they forget their place. Camille sucked in a breath. Her father went still. Utterly still. The dining room tensed. Because everyone knew. He wasn't done. Not even close. He turned fully toward the man. Say that again, Alexander said quietly. And everything in the club shifted. For a heartbeat the dining room held its breath, a suspended, dangerous thing, as if everyone there had been waiting for a signal they suddenly realized they'd been given. Alexander Ward's voice had the soft quality of a gavel. It did not need volume, it needed clarity. Say that again, he had asked the gray-haired man, and the room had tightened like a string about to snap. The older man, Lawrence Devereaux, a founding member whose name hung on plaques and portraits like a permanent claim, did not blink. He set his glass down with a sound that meant he intended the conversation to last. You heard me, Lawrence said. The smile that followed was a clinical thing, the kind of smile that had ended countless debates and made careers. People know their place. Some people belong at the front table. Others are for the back rooms. If words could scorch, they had seared. A few members shifted in their seats, uncomfortable but curious, the old social reflexes of a room built on deference. Some of the younger donors exchanged glances, tasting the first, bitter inkling that this place was held together by agreements no one ever read. Alexander's jaw tightened. He measured his words like one measures a tool. You believe that? He asked quietly. That the rules of civility only apply to a selected set of faces? Lawrence laughed, small and brittle. Tell me, Mr. Ward, what would you have me do? Our traditions are what attract our membership. Our donors want consistency. Traditions built on exclusion are not traditions, Alexander said. The chandelier light cut across his face, showing him in a way that made him look younger and far more dangerous than the older men around the room wanted. They're rot. And I will not have the institutions I invest in to maintain rot under my name. Invest? Lawrence scoffed. You own shares. You don't understand culture. You don't understand stewardship. Around them murmurs rose. The manager had recovered some color and straightened, an agent of procedure and calm appointed by years of polite power. "Mr. Ward," he said, stepping forward like a lesser piece on a chessboard, "I think there's a way to rectify." Rectify? Alexander's hand closed on the leather portfolio on his lap. He opened it again, and now the room could see the pages, board minutes, stock certificates, signatures that trailed like fingerprints across corporate paper. "Here," he said, and slid an extra copy across the table. "This is my company's filing. These are not suggestions. They are legal instruments." For a heartbeat, the dining room held its breath, a suspended, dangerous thing, as if everyone there had been waiting for a signal they suddenly realized they'd been given. Alexander Ward's voice had the soft quality of a gavel. It did not need volume, it needed clarity. "Say that again," he had asked the gray-haired man, and the room had tightened like a string about to snap. The older man, Lawrence Devereaux, a founding member whose name hung on plaques and portraits like a permanent claim, did not blink. He set his glass down with a sound that meant he intended the conversation to last. "You heard me," Lawrence said. The smile that followed was a clinical thing, the kind of smile that had ended countless debates and made careers. "People know their place. Some people belong at the front table. Others are for the back rooms." If words could scorch, they had seared. A few members shifted in their seats, uncomfortable but curious, the old social reflexes of a room built on deference. Some of the younger donors exchanged glances, tasting the first, bitter inkling that this place was held together by agreements no one ever read. Alexander's jaw tightened. He measured his words like one measures a tool. "You believe that?" he asked quietly. "That the rules of civility only apply to a selected set of faces?" Lawrence laughed, small and brittle. "Tell me, Mr. Ward, what would you have me do? Our traditions are what attract our membership. Our donors want consistency." "Traditions built on exclusion are not traditions," Alexander said. The chandelier light cut across his face, showing him in a way that made him look younger and far more dangerous than the older men around the room wanted. "They're rot. And I will not have the institutions I invest in to maintain rot under my name." "Invest?" Lawrence scoffed. "You own shares. You don't understand culture. You don't understand stewardship." Around them murmurs rose. The manager had recovered some color and straightened, an agent of procedure and calm appointed by years of polite power. "Mr. Ward," he said, stepping forward like a lesser piece on a chessboard, "I think there's a way to rectify." Rectify? Alexander's hand closed on the leather portfolio on his lap. He opened it again, and now the room could see the pages, board minutes, stock certificates, signatures that trailed like fingerprints across corporate paper. "Here," he said, and slid an extra copy across the table. "This is my company's filing. These are not suggestions. They are legal instruments." The manager read, his smile evaporating as the numbers and percentages compiled into reality. Security shifted, men trained to read a room's possibility for danger, and the posture of the staff adjusted, suddenly aware they were on a stage in which the script had altered. Lawrence's mouth tightened. For the first time in decades, he felt a small tremor of lost control. He rose, slowly, ceremoniously, as if to reclaim an old authority. "You can't just walk in here and," he began. "I can," Alexander interrupted, cool as winter. "Owning a controlling share confers responsibilities and rights. Tonight I intend to exercise both." He looked at the manager, the security chief, at Renee standing near the front, suddenly small and exposed. His eyes were not angry for show, they were angles of consequence. "Effective immediately," he said, "you and every staff member involved in the mistreatment of my daughter are placed on administrative leave pending a full, independent investigation." A murmur rose again, more panic this time. People loved order until it threatened the order that told them they mattered. Then the love turned into frantic grasping. "We'll have to convene the board," the manager said. "We have bylaws. There are procedures." "Yes," Alexander said, bearing the patience of someone who had learned how to bring bureaucracy into alignment with justice. "We will convene the board." In the meantime, you will ensure Ms. Price is safe and no actions are taken that place her at risk." The security chief started to protest about protocol. He opened his mouth to explain how the situation had been handled in keeping with the club's rules. Alexander placed a hand on his folder, and the man's words stalled. "You will also provide me with all internal communications concerning member complaints, security directives, and the club's guest policies in the last 3 years, Alexander continued. "And I want copies in triplicate by morning." Faces drained as the request settled. Paper, after all, is the slow-acting hammer for things entrenched. Alexander had not come in to bluster. He had come in with instruments. Lawrence, however, did not sit back and accept the new order. Old privileges have a muscle memory, they rarely yield quietly. He rounded slowly on Alexander and let a look of practiced disdain cool the room again. "You cannot unilaterally revise who manages this club because you choose to be offended." He glared in the direction of Camille, as if the girl belonged to the same category his words had boxed. "Members will not stand for being dictated to." A young woman at the end of the table, an heir who sometimes attended with a clutch of trustees, shifted. "What's the rush?" she whispered to the man beside her. "We should vote. We should follow the process." "Process?" Alexander said with a small, almost invisible smile. "Let's talk about the process." He reached into his jacket and produced a phone, not to record, but to do what lawyers and principals do, make calls. He called the club's corporate counsel. The dam of legalities had to be opened from both ends. The lawyer answered on the second ring, voice professional and excused. Alexander's exchange with him was short, the legal vocabulary folded around the room like a calm curtain. Independent auditor, immediate freeze on staffing decisions, access to financial records, injunctions if necessary. The words slid through the dining room like a somber lullaby. The chatter dimmed. Even Lawrence felt the air close, the small reign of his authority eroded by instruments he'd never thought to read. He pounded once, politely on the table. "You cannot be allowed to remake this club overnight. Members have rights." "I intend to consult the members," Alexander replied. "But I will not tolerate humiliation. There will be an independent investigation. There will be consequences for those who abused their power. Consider this my formal notice." Seats shifted. The manager looked like a sodden gray flag. He was not used to being removed with a single, quiet word. He was used to precedents and committees and afternoons in which men agreed to disagree. Alexander cut through all of that like a blade. On the periphery of the room, familiar alliances began to breathe and rearrange themselves. Phone calls started, short, private murmurs. Members stood, not yet ready to take sides openly but feeling the stirrings of self-preservation. There were whispered conversations about rising dues, about board influence, about reputations in the city and donors who might be displeased. Amelia, who had not yet come back into herself, watched Alexander. The girl's face was small and a tiny, dangerous thing stirred behind her eyes, shame meeting the first glow of hope or fear. In the last days, weeks, Amelia had been comfortable with the ease of her social currency. It frightened her now, the way her father's position might hurt those she loved. Lawrence, refusing to bow, lifted his chin and moved to the phone set near the piano. He was a man who knew how to mobilize other men in tailcoats and women with names on golf courses. He had influence. His fingers targeted a number he'd called more than once. He murmured curtly, arranging an emergency members' meeting within hours. Alexander had started a storm. He would see it answered with another. "Then we'll see who the members trust," Lawrence said aloud now. "If you truly own the majority of shares, Mr. Ward, let us see if you have the support to act as you intend. The membership will vote." Alexander's gaze did not move from Lawrence. When he spoke, it was slow and exact. "If you call a vote to remove me, I will accept it. I will respect the process. But know this, my legal counsel has already placed a temporary freeze on any major financial decisions and a hold on the club's funding lines until the investigation is complete." Lawrence's smile flickered. So did the faces around him. The club's operations relied on cash flow, donations, and perception. A freeze was more than inconvenient. It was a slow, financial winter. Someone, perhaps emboldened by the stakes, stood. A woman who had been laughing earlier, whose earrings had flashed like small coins, rose and said with brittle composure, "We will not tolerate being railroaded by one man who decides to bully our staff." Alexander's eyes hardened in a way that cut to bone. This is not about bullying. He fixed the room with a single line. This is about accountability. A murmur of support threaded from unexpected corners. The younger families, the ones who had heard the stories of old indignities and were quietly tired of explaining them to their children, nodded. Quiet hands pressed napkins into laps. The manager, backed into a corner, sputtered about bylaws and the need for decorum. "We can convene the emergency board meeting," he said, eager for a procedure to restore a sense of order. "We will put the matter on the agenda." "We will." Alexander raised a palm. "I have already arranged for independent counsel to come in and begin an inquiry tonight," he said. "I don't want the club to look like it is protected crime. I want it to look like it converted itself into a place that honors dignity." At that moment a different sound threaded the air. The muted thump of tires against wet pavement as black SUVs eased into the drive, cars not of club members, but of people whose business did not rely on bowls of consommé. They were quiet, official vehicles that made one swallow at their appearance. A quietness, like a turning page, passed through the front doors. The staff saw them and paled. The members sat straighter. Lawrence's jaw clamped. He leaned forward. "You're bringing outside forces into our house," he said. "No," Alexander answered calmly. "I'm bringing accountability." He lifted his glass with a hand that did not tremble. "We will have a meeting tonight," he said, "and the records will be open. Whoever wishes to stand for exclusion can prepare their speeches. Everyone else will prepare to defend dignity." The rain outside sharpened into needles against the country club's windows, a steady tapping like impatient fingers drumming on a coffin lid. The once grand dining hall, home to decades of charity galas, quiet political deals, whispered inheritances, had begun to feel like a courtroom. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one forming inside. By the time the emergency board meeting was announced, the membership had fractured into 3 camps. Those terrified of losing their status. Those furious at being forced into accountability. And those silently relieved that someone finally had the courage to confront the rot. The crackle of electricity in the air wasn't from the storm. It was from the truth. The crystal room, usually lit by soft sconces and polite restraint, buzzed with agitation. Board members, shareholders, founding families, and major donors filled every seat. Even the portraits seemed tense, the eyes of old founders glaring down with disapproval at the unprecedented chaos. Lawrence Devereaux stood near the head of the table, cufflinks gleaming like sharpened teeth. He greeted his allies with firm handshakes and narrowed nods, whispering encouragement as if preparing soldiers for war. His voice spread in low, venomous currents. "Don't let Ward bully you. He only owns shares on paper. We built this place. If we let him win, the club will never be the same." On the opposite end, Alexander Ward entered the room with Camille at his side. His presence cut across the tension like a blade. No theatrics. No raised voice. Only purpose. A few members straightened instinctively. Others turned away, unwilling to meet his gaze. But no one dared speak first. Camille followed quietly, still shaken, but now burning with something deeper than humiliation, resolve. She had lived her whole life watching adults wield power like private lightning. Tonight, she would witness what happened when one allowed that lightning to strike the wrong person's daughter. Alexander guided her to a seat in the front row, where she could see everything. "Stay close," he whispered. "This is your club too. You have a right to witness its truth." Camille nodded. For the first time all evening, her hands stopped trembling. The board president, an elderly man named Mr. Hawthorne III, cleared his throat. Normally, his voice carried the soft authority of someone who'd inherited power, not earned it. Tonight, the shook. "This emergency meeting has been called," he began, eyes scanning the room anxiously, "to address allegations brought forth by Mr. Alexander Ward regarding misconduct by staff and potential discrimination against his daughter, Ms. Camille Ward." A ripple spread across the room. Someone muttered, "This is ridiculous." Another hissed, "He's overreacting." One woman whispered, "That girl didn't even dress properly, what did she expect?" Camille's stomach tightened. But she lifted her chin. Let them look. Let them whisper. She wasn't disappearing again. Hawthorne continued, voice cracking. "Before we proceed, we must address whether Mr. Ward has the authority to." He didn't finish. Alexander stepped forward, placing a stack of documents on the table with deliberate calm. "Before you discuss my authority," he said, "you should understand it." He flipped open the top page. Dozens of faces leaned forward despite themselves. "These," Alexander said, "are certified filings showing Ward Holdings' controlling interest in Hawthorne Ridge Country Club. 62% ownership. Majority voting rights. Authority to appoint leadership." He paused. "And authority to remove it." "Guess." Lawrence's jaw tightened. "That's irrelevant," Lawrence countered sharply. "Ownership doesn't grant unilateral power. The board still." "The board," Alexander said evenly, "allowed my daughter to be assaulted and humiliated in a facility bearing my name." His voice didn't rise. The room went cold. "And then," he continued, "allowed its staff to lie about it, escalate it, and blame her for their abuse." A few members shifted uncomfortably. Others hardened, unwilling to let go of the social armor that had shielded them for generations. Alexander placed his palms flat on the table. "I will not allow this club to become a sanctuary for cruelty." Lawrence stepped forward now, old rage simmering behind a polished smile. "Alexander," he said with forced civility, "the club has rules. Those rules govern guest behavior. Your daughter." Alexander turned his head slowly. "Say her name." Lawrence blinked. "Excuse me?" "My daughter has a name," Alexander said, voice barely above a whisper. "Say it." Silence. Members looked back and forth like spectators at a tennis match played with knives. Lawrence swallowed. "Ms. Camille may have misinterpreted the situation." "No," Alexander said. "She didn't." Lawrence bristled, grasping for the old power that had never failed him before. "This club is built on exclusivity," he snapped. "On tradition. Some people simply aren't a good fit." Camille stiffened. Alexander's eyes sharpened like broken glass. "Some people," he repeated. "You know what I mean," Lawrence snarled. "This club has standards. You can't just let anyone, even family, walk in and expect special treatment." Camille's breath caught. Alexander leaned forward. "Special treatment?" he echoed. "My daughter was assaulted." "Guess." "She was shoved, dragged, insulted, denied service, humiliated, and then blamed for it." He looked at the crowd, reading every flinch, every avoidance, every fragile excuse. "And you call that tradition?" Before Lawrence could spit another word, a voice trembled from the back of the room. "I need to say something." All heads turned. It was a young server, Mia Santos, eyes red, hands visibly shaking. Lawrence frowned. "Staff are not authorized to speak at board meetings." "Mia," Alexander said gently, "you may speak." She nodded gratefully. And then she shattered the room. "I saw everything," she whispered. "Not just today. For months." Murmurs broke loose. Mia continued, voice gaining strength. "Some members ask us not to serve black guests. Some tell us to seat them near the exits. Some ask us to check their guest passes twice." Her voice cracked. "Some tell us they don't belong in pictures during events. Staff are told to avoid confrontation, to smile and obey. But today went too far." Dead silence. Mia looked directly at Camille. "I'm sorry," she whispered. We all heard. We were afraid to lose our jobs. But what they did to you was wrong." Camille's vision blurred. Not from shame, but from validation she had been starved of. A few staff members nodded behind Mia. A tide was shifting, and Lawrence felt it slipping from his grip. "This is absurd." Lawrence thundered. "You're taking the word of a waitress over decades of legacy? Over founders?" A few members muttered agreement, but their voices were smaller now, undermined by the staff testimony and the storm of truth gathering force. Alexander turned. His voice was soft, which made it lethal. Legacy does not excuse cruelty. Lawrence scoffed. Maybe your daughter doesn't belong. A sharp crash cut him off. Camille had stood so quickly her chair toppled behind her. Her hands trembled. Her voice did not. I do belong, she said, heart pounding. This is my family's club. My name is on your membership envelopes. My father pays for the grounds you brag about. My family rebuilt the West Wing after the fire. And I have sat here tonight listening to grown adults argue over whether I deserve dignity. Every breath in the room froze. Camille continued. I came here tonight hoping to fit in. Hoping to make friends. Instead, I was told to use the service entrance. Her eyes filled, but her voice rose. Now I know something better. I don't need to belong to any room that needs to shrink me to feel tall. A few younger members clapped softly. Then louder. Then boldly. Lawrence looked around wildly. The tide was turning against him. And when his eyes met Alexander's, he knew. He had lost. Mr. Hawthorne stood again, trembling. You must vote. The ballot papers were handed out. Members marked them in silence. They were collected. Counted. The result. Remove Lawrence Devereaux and the implicated staff. Authorize Alexander Ward's investigation and temporary leadership. By a margin no one predicted. Lawrence's face went white. This isn't over, he whispered. Alexander regarded him calmly. Oh, he said, it hasn't even started. As the meeting adjourned, thunder cracked overhead, rattling the chandeliers. Security, under new orders, escorted Lawrence out. But as Camille walked beside her father toward the lobby, his hand warm around hers, a staff member rushed over. Face pale. Breathing hard. Voice shaking. Mr. Ward, it's the financial auditor. He says you need to see the documents he found. Right now. Alexander frowned. What documents? The staff member whispered. The club has been hiding things. A lot of things. Years worth. And whoever did it, didn't just discriminate. She swallowed hard. They broke federal law. Camille froze. Alexander straightened. The war was only just beginning. The hallway outside the crystal room felt colder than the storm raging beyond the windows. Camille followed close beside her father as the staff member led them toward the administrative wing of the country club. The carpets softened their footsteps, but nothing softened the tension blooming like wildfire between the walls. A thunderclap rattled the glass. Alexander didn't flinch. He had become the storm. Camille, though still shaken, walked with her head higher than it had been all night. Her humiliation had quieted into something sharper, clarity. A kind of awakening she never asked for, but now refused to let go of. As they approached the conference room, two auditors stood waiting, gray-suited, tense, exchanging glances over a stack of files thick enough to break a desk leg. Mr. Ward, one of them said, voice low, we've uncovered something significant. Alexander motioned for Camille to stay with him. Show me, he said. The auditor opened the top file. The first page alone stole everyone's breath. Financial transfers. Unexplained expenditures. Membership outreach funds are routed into private accounts. Staff bonuses allocated exclusively to certain employees, all those tied to a very specific faction of the club's leadership. Lawrence Devereaux's faction. The auditor flipped another page. More discrepancies. False service invoices. Renovation budget padding. Wages withheld from lower-level staff to patch upper-level appearance budgets. And then, the nail in the coffin. A memo. Signed by Lawrence himself. Ensure guest policies remain strict. Maintain separation in the main dining hall. Our donors prefer consistency. Keep the guest passes for the scholarship kids separate. Especially families like the Wards. Camille gasped. Her father's hand closed around the back of her chair until his knuckles went white. Not from rage, from a kind of betrayal that made rage look delicate. The auditor lifted his eyes. These actions violate federal anti-discrimination statutes, as well as state labor laws, and IRS regulations. Camille swallowed. Is it criminal? The auditor nodded. Very. Alexander inhaled slowly, the weight of the revelation pressing against years of polite, professional restraint. But tonight? Tonight there was no restraint. Only justice waiting at the door. He turned to the staff member who had brought them here. Call the authorities, Alexander said. Immediately. She nodded and rushed off. Camille looked at him, eyes wide. Dad, this is going to get messy. Alexander kneeled in front of her. Sweetheart, he whispered, the mess began long before we walked in. Tonight we clean it. Her breath shook, but she nodded. She believed him. Because he believed her. Within 20 minutes, the soft hum of dinner conversations had been replaced by the sharp brightness of red and blue lights flooding the club's polished windows. Police cars. Unmarked SUVs. Federal sedans. Members emerged from the dining hall in confusion as officers streamed inside. What's happening? This is outrageous. Someone explained now. But explanations didn't save anyone. They saw Lawrence Devereaux first, standing by the fireplace, mid-speech, rallying his loyalists with a glass of scotch in his hand. He never saw the officers coming. Mr. Devereaux, the lead agent said, you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, discriminatory business practices, and falsifying financial records. The room froze. Lawrence laughed, high and thin. You can't arrest me. This is my club. No, Alexander said from behind him. It isn't. Lawrence spun, and for a moment, the mask of the untouchable founder cracked open. You, he hissed. You think you can destroy everything we built? You think? You destroyed it yourselves, Alexander replied. I'm just pulling back the curtain. When the handcuffs clicked around Lawrence's wrists, the dining hall broke into chaos. Some members gasped. Some cried. Some hurried to distance themselves from him. Some stormed out, yelling about tradition and rights. And some did something unexpected. They silently looked at Camille, with guilt in their eyes. The waitress, the manager, the security chief, they were all escorted out as well, heads low, their authority evaporated. Every step they took echoed across years of unchallenged cruelty. The following morning, headlines exploded. Country club exposed for systemic discrimination and fraud. Teens humiliation leads to federal raid. Board member arrested in club scandal. Camille watched from home, wrapped in a blanket, her father beside her. The world suddenly cared about the night she wished had never happened. But as hours passed, something inside her shifted. She wasn't ashamed anymore. She was proud. Because she knew something now, something the club had tried hard to keep from her. She belonged anywhere she walked. And no one had the right to decide otherwise. A month later, the country club looked nothing like its past self. The board had been replaced. New leadership, diverse, community-focused, took over. The discriminatory policies were abolished. Anti-racism training was mandatory. A scholarship program was created for underserved youth. And the entire West Wing was repurposed into a community arts and leadership center. Camille stood under that wing's new sign. The Ward Center for Leadership and Belonging. Her father rested a hand on her shoulder. This is your legacy, he said softly. Born from a night no child should have endured. She smiled. I don't want revenge, she said. I want change. And you made it, he replied. During the reopening ceremony, Camille stepped up to the podium. The crowd fell silent. I used to think belonging meant being accepted, she began. But belonging isn't something people give you. It's something you already have, simply because you exist. Murmurs of agreement rose through the room. Some people will try to shrink you so they feel bigger, she continued. But you must never let anyone convince you that your worth depends on their comfort. Her voice steadied, firm, resonant. Never let anyone tell you where you belong. Walk into every room like you have a right to be there, because you do. The applause thundered. Her father watched with quiet pride. This was no longer the girl who had been shoved from a chair. This was the girl who had rebuilt a club. And herself. Camille turned toward the camera, her voice calm but unshakably sure. Rooms don't decide your worth. People don't decide your place. You do. If this story hits something real for you, don't just leave. Add your voice by liking it, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with someone. Cause stories only matter when they start conversations. Have you ever been underestimated or told you didn't belong? What would you have done in Camille's place? Share your thoughts below. Someone reading might need your strength.